Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first Overwatch video in a while with me, Gitbag the Great, where for the first time we'll be looking at an individual hero, in this case the recent addition to the heroes gallery, that is Moira. Or in other words, what if David Bowie was resurrected, turned into an evil scientist, became Irish, and also got a sex change to become a woman? I mean, it's a bit of a mouthful, really, but anyway, Moira is kind of a funny character in a weird sort of way. She's like an unusual mix between Mercy, Symmetra, Zenyatta, and she's got certain aspects of their abilities down to somewhat of an extent in different ways. Let's just quickly go into training room and I'll show you guys what I mean. So, of course, here we are at the Overwatch training facility in Antarctica. Now, her attack is pretty simple. You just hold down right trigger, and it's essentially like Symmetra's main weapon, except for one particular notice I do feel some people overlook, or at the very least is just perhaps not as talked about as it realistically should be, which is that while Moira's main attack does operate roughly in the same way that Symmetra's does, with Moira's you have to aim directly more at the opposing player that you're trying to attack with your ability, rather than aiming in their general direction as you would with Symmetra. I mean, in the past I've killed people with Symmetra where they've been standing to my side. However, I've never really been able to do that with Moira so far, at least. And I mean, that's not really a downside to a certain extent. It might make you a bit cumbersome in fights where you have to fight a lot of individual targets separated from one another, but when it's one-on-one or in an enclosed environment, Moira can be devastatingly powerful with her main attack. It doesn't perhaps have the same level of impactful punch as, say, something like Symmetra's might initially have on an unsuspecting player, but regardless, it does do a lot of damage, and Moira as a result is probably one of the heaviest hitters out of the more unconventional tier of characters in the game. Next, of course, to mention must be her healing ability. Whereas Mercy has hers in a constant stream and has to produce bits of healing in individual shots, Moira kind of has to settle for a weird in-between. On one hand, you can just hold down the left mouse button to continuously heal your allies, but at the same time, it has a limited gauge, which you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, and while it will recharge very slowly, it will run out eventually if you just keep it hold down. And I've gotten caught out several times in the past by just holding it down at allies who necessarily didn't need healing at a particular point in time, whereas with Mercy I could just chill out and just continue healing my allies to my heart's content. This is a part of the reason why I think it's perhaps a little bit misguided, albeit admittedly very understandable, for people to say that Moira is just verbatim more powerful than Mercy is. While I can understand why such a thing would be stated in many cases, I do feel like it is a little bit overstated to a certain degree. Moira, in a raw power face-to-face fight, will beat Mercy any time, and her ability to launch balls of either healing or damage makes her devastatingly dangerous in close quarters situations. As you can see here, if you press E and then press the right mouse button, you can fire a devastatingly powerful ball of energy that damages nearby opponents. Whereas, if we wait for the ball to just quickly recharge, if you do the same thing but this time press the left mouse button, then it produces a ball that I find moves slightly slower, but also produces a healing stream that heals any nearby allies until it also runs out of charge. In a raw face-to-face fight, Moira will usually win, however Mercy has a greater long-term capability or set of abilities that will make her more applicable in a long-term fight, whereas Moira is better in close-quarter combat and in short-term engagements. I mean, Mercy is by and large also somewhat more mobile, and especially with her lock-on flying in ability where you lock onto one of your allies and press shift and you fly towards them, it makes her admittedly not have a great deal of punch because most of her abilities are focused on healing and mobility and boosting your allies' damage, whereas Moira is kind of a weird cross between Mercy and Symmetra. As a result, her abilities are more geared towards enhancing the fight in the short term. However, one thing I have to agree with is that Moira's ultimate is badass. Basically, like with any other character, once your gauge meter for your ultimate reaches 100% and you can see the little icon at the bottom of the centre of your screen glow and have the Q button hover below it, as the case may be, you just press it and, hey presto. With Moira you project what is essentially an Overwatch version of the Kamehameha from Dragon Ball Z, either wrecking your enemy's health pool or applying a nice juicy boost of health to your allies. I also sometimes actually forget that Moira has this ability where if you press shift and move to a certain direction or jump, you can get a nice little boost of, well, just propulsion there really, and it does help to get you out of quick short-term engagements. But that kind of ties into my earlier point about Moira perhaps being better suited towards short-term fights and short-term engagements and being better in close-quarter combat. Overall though, I feel that Moira is definitely a hero for some of the more adventurous types out there, and definitely one that shouldn't be overlooked. Sure, she has a lot of downfallings, and admittedly her long-term engagement capabilities are leaving something to be desired in my personal opinion, but overall I do think she's a generally very decent hero, and while she could perhaps do with a bit of rebalancing in certain places, particularly in terms of her sheer firepower in close quarter situations, especially with these close quarter damage balls, she's still for the most part not as vociferously overpowered in her infancy of being introduced to the game as, say, someone like Bastion was, or Doomfist. I do get the feeling, though, that in part because of her damage capabilities and her ability to do DPS at an extreme rate, that many people who are initially using her at the start of her being introduced into the game are mainly using her as sort of a sledgehammer, a mobile battle axe to deliver quick, short blasts of damage into the enemy ranks. And there's nothing wrong with doing that with her in certain situations, but I do feel like some people are perhaps abusing it a bit much, and sometimes forgetting that she also has healing abilities, which are very important to the success of your team. I mean, I'm not entirely innocent of having not done this myself. I have actually fallen into this stereotype of doing this mainly in arcade and free play, but I can't help but think that there is probably cases where it has happened other than my own, and I hate to think that there's a possibility that that may have happened in, God forbid, competitive. I do think, though, she's a very interesting character. Her design is very interesting, and she has some very interesting set of abilities. But she is a little bit imbalanced in areas. The ways in which she's being used, at least in the infancy of her being introduced to the game, is admittedly only just growing pains of a brand new feature or hero being introduced, but at the same time I'm sure people will probably figure out how to properly use her in good time. The other main concern I have, well, is that she wasn't really introduced with much introduction or fanfare. Even Sombra, who didn't have a huge amount of publicisation or advertisation before the introduction of her character into the game, even she had something of a introduction with a very, very nice and lengthy cinematic that explained her character, if not her backstory, quite well, and a couple of good little comic animations to help along the way since then. Moira, I mean, she got one of those comic animations, but not much else, and I feel like they could have done a bit more to introduce her character before she was put onto PTR, at least. Well, they probably could have used the time that she was being beta tested in the closed server to really figure out how to advertise her, because she is an interesting hero, and I think if we got more of a backstory to her, she'd easily be one of the most popular at the initial launch of her character. But I'm sure we'll see Blizzard try and do something to rectify that at some point in the future. But let's be real here. What is, in all honesty, the worst thing about Moira's character, which I've said is flawed in some areas, but overall is pretty good? What is the one big con of this brand new Irish vagabond, this dangerous scientist who seems to dabble in forbidden arts? It's her legendary skins. In any case, I hope you guys have enjoyed my somewhat comprehensive look at this brand new hero into Overwatch. If you want to see any more content regarding Overwatch on this channel in the future, leave a like, comment, share and subscribe or whatever. Be sure to check out the other gaming videos on this channel as well as my vlogs and podcasts, and if you want to show any extra support, check out my other social media platforms in the video description below. But until next time, I've been Gitbag the Great. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, or at least found it somewhat informative. Until next time, take care, stay safe, have fun with whatever you're doing, and I'll see you guys next time on the battlefield. Bye bye for now.